My grandpa was a world champion, the boy said quietly. The dojo went silent. The coach stepped forward and slapped him in front of everyone. But before anyone could speak, before the shame could settle, a door creaked open and Chuck Norris walked in. Welcome to Chuck Norris Heroics. Let's uncover what really happened. The dojo buzzed with the sounds of sneakers scraping against the polished wooden floor and the sharp thuds of fists striking heavy bags. Children of all ages practiced their forms, their faces a mix of determination and excitement. Into this lively scene stepped a new boy, clutching his backpack tightly, eyes scanning the room nervously, but with a spark of confidence beneath. He was smaller than most, but there was something in his posture that made others pause. As the instructor called the class to attention, the boy found a spot near the front, trying not to draw too much notice. The coach, a burly man with a strict gaze and years of experience, began the session with his usual intensity. The new boy listened closely, absorbing every word, every command. During a break, as the kids chatted and caught their breath, the new boy overheard a group of older students bragging about their family's martial arts achievements. Not wanting to be left out, he raised his voice just enough for a few to hear. My grandpa was a world karate champion, he said, pride coloring his tone. He won medals all over the world. The room went quiet for a moment. Some kids exchanged doubtful glances, while others whispered among themselves. The coach's eyes narrowed, and he approached the boy with slow, deliberate steps. "Is that so?" he asked, voice low but carrying the weight of authority. The new boy nodded firmly. "Yes, sir. I've seen his trophies. He taught me some moves when I visited." Murmurs rippled through the group. The coach crossed his arms, sizing the boy up. There was a tension in the air, a challenge unspoken but understood by everyone present. This wasn't just a claim about a grandparent. It was a statement about belonging, about respect. The coach's face hardened as he prepared to respond, his stance commanding silence. The new boy met his gaze without blinking, heart pounding but unwavering. This moment was the first step of a journey that would test more than just fighting skills. It would test courage, respect, and the true meaning of strength. The atmosphere in the dojo shifted instantly after the new boy's bold declaration. The usual hum of activity faded into an uneasy silence that seemed to settle over everyone like a heavy fog. The coach's sharp eyes never left the boy, and the other students felt the weight of his scrutiny as if it were a physical presence pressing down on them. Whispers broke out quietly among the students. Some questioned the boy's story, exchanging skeptical looks. Others admired his courage, but felt unsure how the coach would react. The older kids, protective of their place in the dojo hierarchy, exchanged glances that carried an unspoken warning. This newcomer had crossed a line. The coach paced slowly across the floor, his jaw clenched tightly. Every movement was deliberate, every step echoing authority. The boy stood rigid, hands clenched at his sides, trying to stay calm, but feeling the tension coil tighter in his chest. "Your grandpa was a world champion?" the coach finally said, voice low but edged with something sharp, almost dangerous. "And what exactly do you expect from us?" "Respect because of who your family is." The boy swallowed hard but kept his gaze steady. "I just wanted to share. I didn't mean to cause trouble." A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint sounds of the other students shifting nervously. The coach's expression flickered. Was it irritation? Disapproval? Something deeper? One of the older students, trying to break the tension, muttered under his breath, "Kids these days, always talking big." The coach shot a glance in his direction, silencing him with a mere look. Then, turning back to the new boy, he spoke again, colder this time. "In this dojo, respect isn't given because of names or stories. It's earned through sweat, discipline, and humility." The boy nodded slowly, understanding the unspoken challenge hanging in the air. Around them, the room seemed charged with anticipation, as if everyone was waiting for the next move, the moment when respect would either be demanded or given. The tension was thick, almost palpable, and no one dared to speak. The coach's eyes darkened, his patience worn thin by the boy's defiance. Without warning, he stepped forward, his voice sharp and cold. You think this is a game? Talking about your grandpa like that. His words cut through the quiet like a blade. The room held its breath. The boy stood firm, but inside his heart pounded fiercely. He hadn't expected this reaction, and the weight of the coach's authority pressed down on him like a heavy stone. The other students watched in tense silence, unsure whether to intervene or stay frozen in place. The coach's hand shot out suddenly, slapping the boy's cheek with a sharp crack that echoed around the room. Gasps erupted from the students, some flinching, others staring wide-eyed. The boy's cheek burned where the slap landed, but he didn't cry out. Instead, he blinked, trying to steady himself, shock and disbelief mingling in his expression. "Enough of your nonsense," the coach snapped, voice harsh and unyielding. "This isn't about stories or family legends. This is about respect, discipline, and earning your place here." The boy's eyes locked onto the coach's, refusing to back down despite the sting. He wanted to say something, to defend himself, but the words caught in his throat. Around them, the dojo remained still, the energy thick with tension. A few of the older students exchanged uneasy looks, while others whispered quietly, unsure if they should step in or let the situation unfold. The coach's anger was like a storm that threatened to break at any moment, and the boy was caught in its center. The coach's voice dropped to a cold whisper, "If you can't respect this place, maybe you don't belong here." The boy swallowed hard, his pride wounded, but his spirit unbroken. This harsh moment was a test, one that would shape everything to come. The room seemed to hold its breath again, waiting for what would happen next in the silent aftermath of the coach's brutal reaction. The sudden slap reverberated through the dojo, a sharp, unmistakable sound that froze everyone in place. The boy's head snapped slightly to the side, his cheek tingling from the sting as he stood rigid, eyes wide with shock. For a moment, the room was utterly silent, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. The students' faces showed a mix of disbelief and concern. Some gasped quietly, others exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to speak up or remain silent. The younger children looked confused, not fully understanding what had just happened, but sensing the seriousness of it all. Even the older students, usually bold and outspoken, seemed caught off guard by the coach's unexpected outburst. The boy's lips pressed tightly together, his jaw clenched. He didn't cry out or back down. Instead, a quiet resolve settled over him, his posture straightening despite the sting. His eyes met the coach's, steady and unflinching, sending a silent message that this wouldn't be the end of the story. The coach's face was hard, his eyes cold and unforgiving. He took a step back, folding his arms as if the slap had already made its point. "This isn't a playground," he said sternly, voice echoing through the room. "Respect is earned, not handed out because of fairy tales." Murmurs began to ripple among the students, some voices low but growing in volume. Questions floated in the air. Was the coach too harsh? Was the boy wrong to speak up? The tension was palpable, and the dojo that moments ago was filled with eager energy now felt charged with uncertainty. The boy remained still, his face a mask of determination. Inside, the sting of the slap burned, but it fueled something deeper, a quiet fire that refused to be extinguished. He knew this moment would mark the beginning of a difficult path, one where he would have to prove himself, not through words, but through action. The coach's gaze lingered on the boy a moment longer before he turned away, signaling the class to resume. The dojo slowly came back to life, but the shock of that slap remained etched in everyone's minds. The dojo seemed to hold its breath. After the sharp slap echoed, an overwhelming silence settled over the room like a heavy fog. The usual sounds, the scraping of shoes, whispered chatter, and the rhythmic thuds of training, vanished as if someone had flicked an invisible switch. All eyes fixed on the boy standing frozen, his cheeks still tingling, his expression unreadable. The other students exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence shaken by the sudden harshness of the moment. The younger children looked up to their older peers, searching for guidance, but even they seemed uncertain how to react. The tension was thick enough to slice through. The coach remained unmoved, arms crossed, his face stern and unreadable. He watched the boy with an intensity that made the air feel electric, waiting for a response. The silence wasn't just absence of noise. It was a question hanging in the air, challenging the boy to break it with something more than words. The boy swallowed hard, the sting on his cheek now a dull ache. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, but he stood tall, refusing to shrink away. Slowly, he exhaled, his breath steadying as he looked around at the faces surrounding him. There was fear, doubt, sympathy, but also something else, something faint but unmistakable: respect. A soft shuffle broke the quiet as the boy shifted his weight. The coach's eyes flicked briefly, then returned to their fixed gaze. The other students waited, suspended in that moment, unsure if the lesson had been learned or if the tension would boil over again. After what felt like an eternity, the coach finally spoke, his voice low but carrying across the room. Training resumes. Show me you can earn your place. The room slowly came alive again. Sneakers scraped the floor. Faint whispers returned, quieter now, more thoughtful. The boy took a tentative step forward, ready to prove himself not through stories or claims, but with every disciplined move he would make. The silence had passed, but its weight remained, a solemn promise that respect was a hard-earned prize. The boy stood motionless for a moment, his mind racing but struggling to catch up with what had just happened. The sting on his cheek was still sharp, but what truly unsettled him was the sudden shift in the room, the coldness in the coach's eyes, and the silence that followed the slap. Confusion swirled inside him like a storm. He had only wanted to share a piece of himself, a proud connection to his grandfather's legacy. Instead, he'd been met with harsh judgment and physical punishment. Why had the coach reacted so fiercely? Was it wrong to speak about family? The question swirled, leaving him dizzy and uncertain. Around him, the other students resumed their movements, but their eyes often flicked toward him. Some showed sympathy, others doubt. The boy noticed a few whispering behind their hands, their words just out of reach, but heavy with speculation. He felt both isolated and watched, caught between a world that didn't quite understand him and a place he wanted desperately to belong to. He rubbed his cheek gently, the warmth contrasting with the earlier sting. The pride he'd felt moments ago was now mixed with embarrassment and pain. Yet beneath it all, a quiet determination began to grow. This confusion wasn't defeat. It was a challenge, a moment to gather strength and prove himself in a way the coach demanded. He glanced at the coach, whose stern gaze hadn't wavered. The message was clear. Respect was not a gift. It had to be earned. The boy wasn't sure how to do that yet, but he knew he had to try. Taking a deep breath, he looked around the dojo, the polished floors, the hanging punching bags, the focused faces of his classmates. This place was more than just a training ground. It was a test of character, of will. Though stunned and confused, the boy's eyes hardened with resolve. He wouldn't let this moment define him. Instead, it would fuel him. The journey ahead would be tough, but he was ready to face it head-on, step by step, punch by punch. Soft whispers rippled through the dojo like a gentle current, weaving between the students as they resumed their positions. The slap lingered in everyone's minds, an unspoken question hanging in the air. What would come next? Groups of kids huddled in small clusters, their voices low but filled with curiosity, confusion, and a hint of sympathy. "Did you see that?" One whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. Why would the coach do that? Maybe the boy was bragging too much, another murmured, trying to justify the harsh reaction. This isn't some storybook dojo. You have to prove yourself. A few of the older students exchanged skeptical looks, unsure whether the newcomer's claim was true or just a way to fit in. "I don't know," said one quietly, "but the coach doesn't mess around. He's tough on everyone." Some younger kids peeked nervously at the boy, who was quietly practicing nearby, his movements careful and precise. They admired his courage to stand his ground, even if they didn't fully understand the coach's reaction. "I hope he's okay," a small voice whispered from the back. The murmurs grew as more students shared their thoughts. Some wondered if the boy's story was true, others doubted it outright. Yet, Beneath the chatter was a growing respect for his quiet strength, how he hadn't crumbled under the coach's scolding or the slap. Teachers and assistants watched silently, exchanging knowing glances but allowing the students to navigate the tension themselves. The dojo, once filled with the rhythmic sounds of training, now felt alive with unspoken questions and shifting loyalties. In the corner, the boy caught fragments of the whispers. Each word weighed on him, but rather than falter, they steeled his resolve. He understood that respect here wasn't given lightly. It was something to be earned through action, through perseverance. As the whispers faded and the class refocused, the boy's eyes met those of a few classmates. In those brief moments, a silent pact was made. He was no longer just a new kid with a story. He was someone who was beginning to carve out his place, step by step, in this demanding world. Word traveled fast beyond the dojo's walls, carried by the voices of students and their families, weaving through the neighborhood like wildfire. The story of a new boy and the coach's harsh reaction became the talk of local streets and schoolyards, sparking curiosity and concern in equal measure. At school, whispers followed the boy down hallways, a mixture of awe and sympathy in the air. Some classmates admired his courage, others questioned his place in the dojo, and a few even wondered if his grandfather's legendary status was real or just a tall tale. "Did you hear what happened at the dojo?" a group of kids would ask, eyes wide with excitement. The coach slapped him. Can you believe it? Parents who dropped off their children at karate practice spoke in hushed tones about the strict coach and the boy who dared to speak up. Some felt the discipline was too severe, while others saw it as part of the hard lessons necessary in martial arts training. "It's tough love," one parent explained to another. "That's how they build character." Local shopkeepers and neighbors caught wind of the story too, adding their own guesses and opinions. The dojo had always been respected in the community, known for producing disciplined fighters and respectful students. This incident, however, stirred debate. Was it a sign of a rigid system or a necessary challenge for the boy to prove himself? The boy's family felt the ripple effects as well. Friends and relatives heard the tale and expressed concern, but also pride. They knew the boy's heart and his determination, believing that this was just the beginning of a journey that would shape him into something stronger. Meanwhile, inside the dojo, the atmosphere shifted subtly. The once quiet newcomer now carried the weight of attention beyond the training mats. His story was no longer just his own. It had become a symbol of challenge and resilience in a place where respect was earned the hard way. As the rumors swirled outside, the boy prepared himself for the path ahead, knowing that the eyes of the community were now watching, waiting to see if he could rise to the challenge. The sting of the slap and the weight of whispers outside the dojo settled deep inside the boy, fueling a quiet fire that burned steadily beneath his calm exterior. Every glance, every whispered word, whether of doubt or sympathy, became a reason to push harder. The path ahead was daunting, but his resolve only grew stronger. Early mornings found him stretching and practicing moves alone before anyone else arrived. The cold air bit at his skin, but he welcomed it, knowing discipline meant sacrifice. His hands were raw from countless repetitions of punches and blocks, yet he refused to stop, each movement an act of defiance against the doubts that lingered around him. Inside the dojo, he paid closer attention than ever before. Every instruction from the coach, every correction, became a challenge he embraced instead of resented. He watched the older students' techniques carefully, analyzing their form and precision, determined to learn from them rather than be intimidated. Though the coach remained distant and stern, the boy noticed subtle shifts, a nod of acknowledgement here, a less harsh correction there. He understood that earning respect wasn't about words or stories. It was about showing up, grinding through the hard work, and refusing to give up. The other students, too, began to see the change. The quiet kid who had once seemed out of place now moved with purpose and confidence. His punches were sharper, his stances steadier, and his focus unbreakable. Slowly, some of the skeptics softened, recognizing that this boy was here to stay. At home, The boy replayed his grandfather's lessons in his mind, remembering the pride and humility that had come with those stories. He wasn't just training to prove the coach wrong. He was training to honor a legacy, one that required more than words. Every drop of sweat, every ache in his muscles was a step toward something greater. Determination had taken root, growing stronger with each challenge, ready to face whatever came next. The boy was no longer just the new kid with a story. He was a fighter beginning to claim his place. Late into the quiet evenings, when the dojo doors were locked and the world outside had settled into stillness, the boy found himself slipping back inside. The familiar scent of polished wood and worn mats greeted him like an old friend. Here, away from prying eyes and whispered judgments, he could focus solely on himself. He had learned that respect and skill didn't come from words or stories, but from relentless practice, sometimes when no one was watching. So, he pushed open the door carefully, the faint creak barely breaking the silence. The cool air inside stirred his breath into mist as he warmed up, stretching limbs stiff from the day's wear. With slow, deliberate movements, he rehearsed the forms his grandfather had taught him, blending those lessons with the techniques learned from the coach and other students. Each strike, each block, carried the weight of his determination. He shadowboxed, imagining opponents and challenges, pushing himself beyond the limits he thought he had. The solitude was both a comfort and a test. Without the noise of the class or the coach's stern commands, it was up to him to maintain focus, to correct mistakes, and to build strength. Sometimes fatigue threatened to overwhelm him, but he dug deeper, reminding himself that this secret training was the foundation of everything he wanted to achieve. Outside, the neighborhood was dark and quiet, unaware of the quiet warrior working tirelessly inside the dojo. The moonlight filtered through the windows, casting long shadows on the floor as he moved with growing confidence and precision. He knew these late-night sessions wouldn't erase the coach's skepticism overnight, but they were proof of his commitment, silent declarations that he was ready to face the challenges ahead. With every drop of sweat and every practiced move, he built more than skill. He built belief in himself. As the night deepened, the boy finally paused, breath steady, heart calm. In that stillness, he understood that true strength was born in moments like this, alone, focused, and unyielding. The journey was far from over, but he was ready. The evening air hung heavy with anticipation as the dojo's usual quiet was broken by the soft click of the front door. The boy paused mid-punch, his eyes narrowing toward the entrance. A figure stood silhouetted against the fading light, calm and steady. A stranger whose presence immediately shifted the atmosphere. The visitor's steps were measured, confident, carrying a quiet authority that demanded attention without a word. The coach glanced up from his spot by the mat, eyebrows knitting together as he watched the newcomer approach. The students fell silent, sensing that something important was about to unfold. The man was tall and lean, with a weathered face that told stories of years spent in discipline and battle. His eyes held a sharpness that pierced the room, yet beneath there was a warmth that hinted at understanding and respect. As he entered fully, the boy's heart quickened, not from fear, but from a strange familiarity, as if this visitor carried the echoes of stories long told in hushed tones. The coach straightened, his usual stern demeanor giving way to a rare moment of deference. "You're far from a city," he said, voice low but respectful. The visitor nodded slowly. "I came to see the new student," he replied, his voice calm and steady. "He's got fire in him, the kind that can't be taught in just a few lessons." All eyes turned to the boy, whose cheeks flushed with a mix of surprise and pride. The visitor's gaze met his, and in that instant, something unspoken passed between them, a silent recognition of potential and challenge. The coach stepped forward, curiosity mingling with caution. "And who might you be?" The visitor smiled faintly, a knowing glint in his eyes. "Someone who knows what it takes to earn respect. Someone who believes this boy might just have what it takes." Whispers spread through the room, and the boy felt a surge of hope. The arrival of this mysterious figure marked a turning point, not just in his training, but in the story that was unfolding before everyone's eyes. The journey ahead suddenly felt charged with new possibilities. The dojo doors swung open with quiet strength, and a figure stepped inside, calm, commanding, and unmistakable. The moment Chuck Norris entered, the entire room seemed to shift. The usual chatter and restlessness were replaced by a profound silence, as if time itself had paused to acknowledge his presence. His tall frame moved with ease and confidence, every step deliberate yet effortless. The worn leather of his jacket told stories of battles fought and lessons learned over decades. His eyes scanned the room, sharp but kind, settling finally on the boy who had become the center of attention. The coach straightened immediately, a respectful nod barely hidden beneath his stern exterior. The students watched in awe, whispers of recognition spreading quickly. This was no ordinary visitor. This was a legend, a master whose name alone carried the weight of generations. Chuck Norris's voice, calm but filled with quiet authority, broke the silence. "I heard there's a boy here who's ready to prove himself," he said, his gaze locking with the boy's. That kind of fire doesn't come from nowhere. The boy's heart pounded fiercely. Standing before him was the very embodiment of the stories he'd heard growing up, the strength, discipline, and honor that defined a true fighter. Despite the nerves, he stood tall, meeting Chuck's gaze without hesitation. The coach stepped back, allowing the moment to breathe. Chuck Norris approached the boy slowly, his movements steady and measured. "It's not about who you are or where you come from," he said quietly. "It's about what you're willing to fight for and how hard you're willing to work." The room filled with an energy unlike anything before. Students leaned forward, absorbing every word. The boy felt a surge of inspiration wash over him, a spark ignited by the presence of a man who had walked the path he aspired to. As Chuck Norris's eyes softened with encouragement, the boy understood that this moment was more than a visit. It was a challenge and a gift, a chance to grow beyond his doubts and become the fighter he was meant to be. The dojo's atmosphere shifted palpably as all eyes turned toward the legendary fighter standing quietly at the edge of the room. Chuck Norris's presence was magnetic, drawing attention without effort. The usual clamor of chatter and shifting feet faded into reverent silence, every student and teacher alike sensing the weight of history in the air. The boy felt his heart race as the crowd's gaze settled on Chuck. It wasn't just his fame that commanded respect. It was the undeniable aura of mastery and calm strength that surrounded him. Every line on Chuck's weathered face told a story of decades spent honing discipline, overcoming obstacles, and living the very principles the dojo upheld. Students whispered among themselves, eyes wide with awe. "That's Chuck Norris," one breathed, voice barely audible. "He's the reason so many of us started training." The coach, usually the unquestioned authority in the room, found himself momentarily silent, watching with a mixture of pride and humility. The presence of the legend was a silent lesson in itself, proof of what could be achieved through perseverance and respect. Chuck's gaze swept over the room, landing on the boy who had sparked so much attention. His eyes held a spark of approval, as if recognizing the same determination that had fueled his own journey. The boy felt a quiet surge of confidence, bolstered by the unspoken support of this iconic figure. A few students straightened, inspired by the energy now filling the space. The dojo felt smaller somehow, the distance between beginner and master bridged by the shared goal of growth and respect. As the moments stretched, the boy realized that this was more than a chance encounter. It was a turning point. With the legendary fighter's eyes upon him, the path ahead seemed clearer and the challenges less daunting. The dojo, once a place of quiet tension and whispered doubts, now hummed with renewed purpose. The legendary fighter's presence had awakened something deep within everyone present, a reminder of what was possible when courage met opportunity. The coach stood rigid, his usual air of authority tempered by the undeniable presence of Chuck Norris. Pride had long been his foundation, a hard-earned respect built over years of training and teaching. But now, standing beside the legendary fighter, he felt that pride subtly challenged, as if a mirror had been held up to show him both his strengths and his limitations. For years, the coach had maintained strict discipline, believing that respect was forged through toughness and strict rules. Yet, as he watched Chuck Norris engage with the boy, offering words of encouragement rather than reprimand, a seed of doubt began to take root. The coach realized that there was more than one way to teach, more than one way to inspire. The room seemed to tighten around him, the weight of expectations pressing in. He glanced toward the boy, who was standing taller than before, energized by Chuck's presence. The coach felt a flicker of pride, but also an uneasy sense that he might need to change, perhaps soften his approach, or at least understand the boy's spirit more deeply. Chuck's calm demeanor and quiet respect for the boy's determination highlighted what the coach had sometimes overlooked: the importance of belief and patience. The coach's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in contemplation. He was a man of tradition, yet here was a living testament to evolution, reminding him that pride should never become stubbornness. A subtle shift passed through the dojo, the unspoken acknowledgement that the coach's role was not just to demand respect, but to nurture it. The challenge wasn't to his authority, but to his understanding of what made a true fighter. Though his stance remained firm, there was a softness behind his eyes, a readiness to learn and adapt. The coach recognized that this moment, this visitor, and this boy were catalysts for growth, for himself as much as for his students. In that quiet reflection, the coach's pride was not diminished but deepened, tempered now with humility and the possibility of change. The journey ahead was no longer just the boys', it was his as well. The room was heavy with anticipation as Chuck Norris stepped forward, his gaze steady and commanding. The boy watched closely, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about punches or kicks. It was about something deeper: respect. Chuck's voice was calm but firm as he addressed the entire dojo. Respect isn't given because of your name, your family, or how loud you can speak. It's earned through your actions, through humility, discipline, and perseverance. His words hung in the air, clear and unwavering. He turned slightly, locking eyes with the boy. You've already taken the hardest step, standing up despite the doubt and challenges. But respect grows when you keep moving forward, even when no one's watching. The coach, standing nearby, nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson in a new light. The students around the room leaned in, their usual chatter replaced by quiet reflection. This was more than training. It was a moment that would shape their understanding of what it truly meant to be a fighter. Chuck continued, "It's not about who's stronger or faster. It's about character. The way you treat others, the way you handle defeat, and the way you carry yourself when the pressure is highest." The boy felt a swell of pride mixed with determination. These weren't just words. They were a call to action, a roadmap for earning not just respect from others, but self-respect. He glanced at the coach, seeing the hint of approval in his eyes. As the lesson settled in, the dojo felt lighter, charged with a renewed sense of purpose. The boy took a deep breath, ready to embrace the path ahead with humility and strength. Chuck's final words lingered. Respect isn't a prize handed out. It's the result of every choice you make. In that moment, everyone understood that true respect was the foundation upon which all great fighters were built. Chuck Norris settled into a quiet corner of the dojo, the students gathering around with eager eyes and attentive ears. His presence was calm, yet every word he spoke carried the weight of decades lived on the path of discipline and perseverance. The boy listened closely, hanging on each phrase as if they were keys unlocking a hidden door. "I didn't become who I am overnight," Chuck began, his voice steady and warm. "It took years of hard work, failures, and lessons learned the hard way. My journey wasn't just about fighting others. It was about fighting myself, my doubts, and my fears." He paused, glancing around at the young faces. "When I was your age, I faced challenges that felt impossible. People doubted me, laughed at my dreams, and sometimes I even doubted myself. But what kept me going was a simple truth. Strength isn't just about muscles or speed. It's about heart, resilience, and the willingness to keep going when everything says to stop. The coach, standing nearby, nodded slowly, clearly moved by the story. Chuck continued, "I've been knocked down more times than I can count. Every time I got back up, not because I was fearless, but because I learned that true strength comes from persistence and humility." The boy felt a swell of inspiration rise within him, as if Chuck's words were a lifeline thrown across the years. "Your story shows that respect and skill come from dedication, not just talent," Chuck said, meeting the boy's eyes directly. "You've already started on that path by standing up and refusing to give in." As the story unfolded, the room felt charged with a new energy, one born from shared experience and hope. The students realized that even legends had humble beginnings and that their own journeys were just as important. Chuck's final advice lingered in the air. Don't rush to prove yourself to others. Prove it to yourself every single day. That's how you earn respect that lasts a lifetime. The boy nodded quietly, ready to carry that lesson forward with every step he took. The boy felt a new energy pulsing through him as Chuck Norris's story settled deep in his mind. The doubts that had weighed him down began to lift, replaced by a quiet confidence that grew stronger with each breath. He stood taller, moved with greater purpose, and met the coach's gaze without flinching. In the following days, his training took on a sharper focus. Every punch, every kick, and every stance carried a renewed determination. He no longer saw challenges as obstacles, but as opportunities to prove not just his skill, but his spirit. The lessons from Chuck's words echoed in his mind. Strength comes from persistence, humility, and belief in oneself. The coach noticed the change immediately. Corrections came less frequently, replaced by nods of acknowledgement and subtle encouragement. The other students began to treat him differently too. No longer just the new kid with a story, he was becoming a respected member of the dojo, a fighter with heart and grit. During practice, the boy moved with a fluidity and confidence that surprised even himself. His punches were sharper, his footwork steadier. When he faced the coach's stern challenges, he met them head-on, fueled by the belief that he could grow beyond his past. Even outside the dojo, his newfound confidence radiated. He walked with a steadier step and spoke with a quiet assurance that made others listen. Friends who once doubted him now looked to him with respect, sensing the transformation that had taken place. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the training mats, the coach called the boy over. With a rare smile, he said, "You're ready for the next step." The boy's heart swelled, not with arrogance, but with a humble pride born from hard work and perseverance. He knew the journey was far from over, but now he faced it with the strength and confidence to keep moving forward. With every step, every breath, he carried the lessons learned, not just from his grandfather or the coach, but from the legendary fighter who believed in him. The boy was no longer just trying to earn respect. He was becoming worthy of it. The coach stood quietly by the edge of the dojo, watching the boy move with a precision and confidence that had been absent before. His eyes, once sharp and critical, softened as he observed the transformation unfolding right in front of him. The stubborn pride that had fueled his strictness began to give way to something more thoughtful, an openness he hadn't allowed himself in years. He recalled his own early days, the countless hours of discipline, the relentless drive to prove himself. Seeing the boy's determination sparked a memory of his own struggles, and for the first time, the coach questioned whether his harsh methods were the only way. During training sessions, the coach's corrections became more measured, less harsh. Instead of sharp reprimands, he offered guidance and subtle encouragement. When the boy faltered, the coach's eyes held patience rather than disappointment. The room felt different, less tense, more focused. Other students noticed the shift too. The coach's tone had softened, and his stance grew less rigid. His respect for the boy became evident in small gestures, a nod after a well-executed move, a rare smile when the boy met a challenge head-on. It was as if the coach was learning to balance discipline with understanding. One afternoon, after a particularly tough session, the coach called the boy aside. "You've come a long way," he said quietly. "Not just in skill, but in heart. That's what matters most." The boy nodded, feeling the weight of those words. It wasn't just about mastering techniques anymore. It was about earning the coach's respect in a way neither of them had expected. The coach's evolving attitude breathed new life into the dojo. The once cold atmosphere warmed, inviting growth not only for the boy but for everyone who trained there. The journey was still ongoing, but the foundation had shifted from strictness to mutual respect, from pride to understanding. In that quiet transformation, both teacher and student found a new path forward, one built on trust, patience, and shared purpose. The dojo was charged with energy as the boy stepped into the center of the training mats, the eyes of the coach and fellow students fixed intently on him. Today was not about words or stories. It was about action. The boy had been given the chance to demonstrate not just skill, but the strength of his character. He moved with a quiet confidence, every step deliberate, every motion precise. The routines he had practiced in secret, the lessons learned from his grandfather and Chuck Norris, all came together in a seamless flow. Punches snapped through the air, blocks held strong, and his stance was steady like a rooted tree. This was the strength born of discipline and persistence. The coach observed closely, noting the calm in the boy's eyes, a calm that spoke of resilience and respect rather than arrogance or desperation. When the boy faced a series of challenging drills, he met each one with unwavering focus, refusing to falter even when fatigue began to gnaw at his muscles. At one point, the coach stepped forward, engaging the boy in a sparring session. The movements were swift and sharp, a dance of skill and strategy. The boy blocked, countered, and adjusted his approach with an instinct that belied his age and experience. When the coach pressed harder, the boy didn't back down. Instead, he adapted, showing flexibility and strength that impressed even the most seasoned observers. The room was silent, except for the sounds of controlled breathing and the occasional thud of feet against mats. This was no longer about proving a point. It was a true demonstration of inner strength. When the session ended, the coach nodded approvingly, his eyes reflecting a mix of pride and respect. "Strength isn't just about power," he said quietly. "It's about control, heart, and the courage to keep pushing forward." The boy, breathing steady but his spirit soaring, realized that this moment marked a new beginning. He had shown not just his ability to fight, but his true strength, the strength that earns respect and builds legacy. The dojo had witnessed his transformation, and more importantly, so had he. The peace and progress in the dojo were suddenly threatened when news arrived of an upcoming regional tournament, a test that would challenge everything the boy and the entire dojo had worked for. The announcement sent a ripple of excitement and tension through the training halls. For many, this was the chance to prove themselves on a larger stage. For the boy, it was the ultimate trial. The coach gathered the students, his voice steady but carrying a new intensity. "This tournament will push you beyond your limits," he warned. "It's not just about fighting others. It's about facing your own fears and doubts." As preparations began, the dojo became a hive of focused energy. The boy trained harder than ever, pushing through exhaustion and self-doubt. Every strike, every movement was honed with precision and purpose. The lessons from Chuck Norris and the coach echoed in his mind: respect, discipline, humility. But the challenge wasn't just physical. Rival dojos, hearing of the boy's rapid rise, began to cast doubt and spread rumors. Some questioned if he was truly ready. Others dismissed him as a novice with a family name, but no real skill. The pressure mounted, turning friendly training into fierce preparation. Inside the dojo, tension simmered. Students questioned their own readiness, and the boy wrestled with the weight of expectation. Doubts whispered in quiet moments. Was he truly ready? Could he live up to the legacy he claimed? The coach noticed the strain, but remained a steady anchor. "Strength isn't about never feeling fear," he reminded the boy. It's about facing it and moving forward anyway. The night before the tournament, the dojo was silent, but for the soft sounds of focused training and steady breathing. The boy stood alone, muscles aching but spirit unbroken, ready to face whatever came. This was more than a competition. It was a test of everything they had built, their discipline, respect, and heart. The dojo, its students, and the boy were poised on the edge of transformation, ready to prove that true strength came not from titles, but from courage and perseverance. The day of the tournament arrived with a whirlwind of noise, flashing lights, and the hum of nervous energy. The boy stood at the edge of the competition floor, heart pounding but mind clear. All the hours of training, the doubts faced, and the lessons learned had led to this moment, a chance to prove himself beyond the walls of the dojo. As he stepped onto the mat, the crowd's murmurs faded into the background. His focus sharpened, every muscle poised for action. The first opponent was fierce, aggressive, but the boy met each attack with steady defense and calculated counters. His movements were fluid, honed by the countless secret practices and the guidance of those who believed in him. With each match, the boy's confidence grew. He remembered Chuck Norris's words about strength being more than power. It was heart, discipline, and the courage to keep pushing. He fought not just to win, but to honor the journey that had brought him here. The crowd watched in awe as the boy advanced through the rounds, his calm determination cutting through the tension. Opponents who had underestimated him found themselves outmatched, not just by skill, but by an unyielding spirit. Finally, standing face to face with the tournament's champion, the boy felt a surge of both respect and resolve. The match was intense, each strike and block a test of endurance and will. The final moments were a blur of motion and focus, culminating in a decisive move that left the champion yielding. Silence fell for a heartbeat before the crowd erupted into cheers. The boy's teammates and coach rushed forward, pride shining in their eyes. The boy, breathing heavily but steady, looked around, not for applause, but to see the respect reflected in the eyes of those who had doubted him. He had proven his worth not just through victory, but through the strength of character that had carried him through every challenge. In that moment, the boy wasn't just a competitor. He was a true fighter, worthy of the respect he had earned with every step. After the final match, the dojo was alive with celebration and applause, but the boy's attention was drawn to the coach standing quietly nearby. The stern expression he usually wore had softened, replaced by something more vulnerable and sincere. The noise of the crowd seemed to fade as the coach approached, his steps measured and deliberate. Standing before the boy, the coach took a deep breath, his voice low but steady. "I owe you an apology," he said, locking eyes with the boy. "When you first came here, I judged you too quickly. I let pride and my own expectations cloud what really matters, your heart and determination." The boy blinked, surprised but attentive. The weight of the coach's words settled over him, filling a space left by past doubts and harsh lessons. "Thank you, sir," he replied quietly, feeling a mix of relief and respect. The coach nodded, a rare warmth breaking through his usual reserve. "You've earned your place here, not because of stories or family, but because of who you've become through your hard work and perseverance. I was wrong to doubt that." Around them, the other students watched, sensing the significance of this moment. The coach's apology was more than words. It was a bridge, a step toward understanding and mutual respect. The boy felt a swell of pride, not just in his achievement, but in the growth of the man who had guided him. It was a reminder that even the strongest teachers are capable of learning, and that respect is a two-way street. The coach placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes. "Keep fighting with honor. You've got what it takes to go far." In that simple exchange, the dojo was transformed. The harshness of the past gave way to a future built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. The boy and the coach, once divided by doubt, now stood united, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. The atmosphere in the dojo had shifted in ways no one could have anticipated. The once tense, rigid walls now seemed to pulse with a fresh energy, a sense of renewal that embraced every corner and every student. The boys' journey had become a catalyst for change, inspiring everyone present to rethink what it truly meant to be part of this community. Training sessions took on a new tone, blending discipline with encouragement. The coach, once stern and unyielding, had softened without losing his edge. His lessons carried deeper meaning, teaching not just technique, but also the values of patience, respect, and growth. Students who had once competed against one another now worked together, pushing each other to be better. The boy, no longer just a newcomer, was embraced as a symbol of perseverance and humility. His story of struggle, determination, and eventual triumph was shared among the students, reminding them that everyone's path was unique but equally important. The dojo became a place where every member's progress was celebrated, where challenges were met with support rather than judgment. Parents and community members noticed the change too. The dojo's reputation blossomed, attracting new students eager to be part of an environment where respect and character were as valued as skill. The local tournaments saw the dojo's team growing stronger, united by a spirit that went beyond competition. One evening, as the sun set and cast a warm glow across the mats, the coach gathered everyone together. "This is more than a dojo," he said, voice steady and proud. "It's a family, a place where we learn from each other, grow together, and become more than just fighters." The boy looked around at his friends, his coach, and the familiar space that had become his second home. He felt a deep sense of belonging and purpose, knowing that this new beginning wasn't just his, it was theirs all. The dojo stood ready, transformed by the journey of one boy and the strength found in respect, unity, and hope. Together, they faced the future, not as individuals, but as a team bound by more than just martial arts. The boy stood quietly at the center of the dojo, surrounded by friends, family, and fellow students. The walls, once witnesses to tension and doubt, now echoed with stories of perseverance and triumph. Today was a celebration, not just of victory in competition, but of a legacy honored and respect truly earned. He thought back to the beginning, the proud claim of his grandfather's championship, the harsh slap that challenged his resolve, the doubts whispered in the shadows. Each moment had shaped him, carving a path toward who he had become. It wasn't just about family history. It was about forging his own identity with humility and strength. The coach stepped forward, his eyes shining with pride. "You've done more than prove your skill," he said, voice steady and warm. "You've shown what it means to earn respect. That's the true legacy of a fighter." Around them, the dojo's members nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting admiration and hope. The boy felt the weight of their gaze, not as pressure, but as a shared bond forged through hard work and mutual respect. Chuck Norris, a silent figure at the back, gave a rare nod of approval, a quiet acknowledgement of the boy's journey and growth. His presence was a reminder that legends were made not only by their victories, but by the strength they inspired in others. The boy's heart swelled with gratitude for his grandfather's lessons, the coach's guidance, and the challenges that had tested him. More than trophies or titles, it was the respect he had earned through discipline, courage, and perseverance that mattered most. As the ceremony ended and the dojo filled with laughter and congratulations, the boy looked forward with quiet confidence. His legacy was no longer just a story told. It was a living testament to what could be achieved when one faced adversity with honor. In that moment, surrounded by those who had believed in him, he understood that true respect was earned step by step, fight by fight, and that legacy was something built every day,